Cypress first up.
Good evening. Welcome to the Tuesday, September 29th regular City Council meeting. D. Stiles Elliott, will you please call roll?
Mayor Benjamin.
Present.
Councilmember Delira.
Here.
Councilmember Fajarin.
Here.
Councilmember Guido.
Here.
Councilmember Parks.
Here.
Councilmember Weller. Councilmember Wright.
Here.
On to mayor's, community announcements. The first up is this Saturday, we have a community table event. We'd like to invite all community members and those that are, and when we talk about community, it's those that work, live, play here, so you don't have to live here to be a community member, to Pullman to go and gather a community table event on Saturday, September 13th. You can pick up your favorite to-go order or a picnic lunch and bring it down to Kamaikan Street, and let's eat dinner together from 5 to 7 p.m. Keep an eye out this week for restaurant specials just for this event, and don't forget to play Pullman Community Bingo on the day to win free ice cream from Neil's Coffee and Ice Cream. We're still looking for volunteers, restaurants, and sponsors. For more information to partner with the city on this event, you can go to pullman-wa.gov/community table. Next up, community billing update. The City of Pullman will be transitioning to an all-new utility billing access portal as of September 15th. If you currently pay via cash, check, or ACH, you will not need to change the way you pay. If you auto-pay through the City of Pullman website, your August utility bill will not automatically be paid after September 14th. You will need to register for a new utility billing portal and set up your payments again. And you can visit pullman-wa.gov utility to learn more. Coming up next week, we have First Down Friday. Join us the day before Apple Cup for First Down Friday on September 19th from 4 to, it's actually going to be from 5 to 8 on Olson Street next to Neal Public Library. Hope to see you there. They moved it a little bit later for people. The WSU game park and ride service. Pullman Transit provides free park and ride bus service for home football games. You can visit pullman-wa.gov/park and ride to see the free game day park and ride times and routes. And from Parks and Rec, the Teen Center at Pullman Parks and Rec, the Teen Center is open on weekday afternoons for grades 6 through 8. Activities include art and crafts, basketball, cooking, games, homework help, and more. Passes are only $15 a month or $75 for the whole school year. You can visit pullman-wa.gov/rec for more information. From the library, the Makers Club for Kids in grades K through 5 are invited to Neal Public Library on Saturday at 10 a.m. to make fall table centerpieces at Makers Club. From paper flowers to colorful jars and seasonal decorations, participants will take home a unique piece to brighten your table, and please bring them to Pullman to go and gather on Saturday evening to show them off. The Adult Crafters Club, hey grown-ups, leave your kids, pets, small siblings, and seriousness at home and come to Adults Craft Club on Tuesday, September 16th from 4 to 6 at Neal Public Library. This month's craft is macrame plant hangers. To see more listings of other community events, you can visit the City of Tourism page at visitpullman.com/events. And I have two proclamations for tonight. The first one is a proclamation related to Constitution Week. Whereas we are in the year leading up to the semi-quincentennial, or the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States as marked by the Declaration of Independence in 1776, whereas the Constitution of the United States of America, ratified in 1788, is the world's longest surviving written charter of government, whereas the first three words, "We the people," affirm that the government of the United States exists to serve its citizens, whereas September 17th, 2025 marks the 238th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States, Whereas for over 2 centuries, the Constitution has remained in force because of its framers' successful separation and balanced governmental powers to safeguard the interest of majority rule and minority rights, of liberty and equality, and of federal and state governments. Now I, therefore, Mayor Francis Benjamin of Pullman, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week, and urge all citizens to study the Constitution and reflect on the privilege of being American with all the rights and responsibilities which this privilege provides. And then the second proclamation is Library Card Sign-Up Month, and we heard a lot about the library earlier. Whereas the libraries are foundational to education, imagination, and opportunity, offering everything from early literacy programs to digital tools that support lifelong learning, whereas libraries welcome all people, serving as inclusive and accessible community hubs that connect individuals across cultures, generations, and experiences, whereas libraries curate collections and design programs that reflect the diversity of the population they serve, ensuring equitable access to information technology and culture, whereas libraries help individuals navigate life's challenges by providing trusted information, digital access, job search support, and connections to essential services, whereas libraries contribute to thriving local economies by equipping job seekers, entrepreneurs, students, and creators with tools and training to succeed. Whereas in times of both crisis and calm, libraries and their staff remain steadfast in supporting and strengthening our communities. And whereas libraries' resources help households save money, reduce waste, and make sustainable choices, all through the simple power of a sharing public good. Now, therefore, I, Francis Benjamin of Pullman, Washington, do hereby proclaim September 2025 as Library Card Sign-Up Month. Encourage all residents to sign up for a library card and explore and discover and connect the endless possibilities it offers. So 2 things there. With that, the last thing that I want to do is also thank the Whitman County .09 funds. They awarded a $1 million award to fund construction of the port's technology transfer and commercialized scaling facility. That's something that will be located in Pullman and is actually something that is going to be a great economic bolster and resource for our community. The next item up is non-agenda related community comments. This agenda item is the first of 2 opportunities during this meeting for the public to bring comments to the attention of elected officials. Specifically, this item is reserved for public comments, concerns, or other information not related to a previous public hearing or final action on this agenda. Final action items include confirmation appointments, consent agenda, and regular agenda items. This agenda item for comments will not exceed 30 minutes in total. Comments will be directed to the mayor or the city council as a body. No comment should be directed to an individual council member. Also, RCW doesn't allow for community comments to be used to support a political campaign. With that, is there anyone who'd like to provide non-agenda item related community comments? Please come forward, and you'll have 3 minutes, so we can set it to 3 minutes in order to provide your comments. Please go ahead.
Mr. Mayor and City Council members, my name is Matthew McNally, and since 2006, I have served as the pastor of Pullman Presbyterian Church, located at 1630 Northeast Stadium Way. In addition to my vocation as pastor, I served the city of Pullman and its residents for 11 years as the law enforcement chaplain for the Pullman Police Department for both Ted Weatherly and Gary Jenkins. Pullman Presbyterian Church was founded in 1899, and throughout our 125-year history, we've sought to be a blessing to the city of Pullman. Long before my installation in June of 2006, churches on College Hill have used their properties to raise funds for various programs benefiting children and charitable causes. The most successful fundraising use of our properties has been to provide game day parking for WSU football games. As you know, there's not enough available parking near the stadium to accommodate everyone's needs. The local churches on College Hill fill an important role in this regard. Since my arrival at Pullman Presbyterian Church, we have utilized grassy areas on our property in addition to paved surfaces to provide overflow parking for games and large community events. Throughout my nearly 19-plus year history pastoring this congregation, we have never once had code enforcement contact us about our use of the church lawns for those 6 Saturdays a year when, for about 6 hours, we have cars on them. It was not until Councilman Weller sent an email to our church office last October and CC'd the mayor, chief of police, and city manager that this issue of temporary parking on our lawn was called into question. Parking on grassy areas for special events is not without precedent for the city of Pullman. Numerous times a year, the city allows parking on grass to accommodate events such as the Lentil Festival and 4th of July. Permission to temporarily park on grass areas maintained by the city can be received through a written process. Since Mr. Weller's correspondence, we have pursued ways to both honor the intent of our city's code while also providing flexibility that benefits the greater good for special events. In conversations with both city officials and the Pullman PD, we have received an answer to our inquiry, and the answer is this: we don't enforce those lawn parking ordinances on game day, and we also do not have a process for granting permission for that. I am requesting a temporary pause of enforcement of the city ordinance regarding lawn parking for WSU football games this season until council has had time to craft a parking solution for special occasions that benefits the whole city, one similar to our current noise variance application process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to provide community comment? Seeing none, we'll close that. Next up is city council member comments, and with that, I'll start with Councilmember Fajarin.
Thank you. I'd like to once again publicly thank our city administration, especially our police department, for their following of the Keep Washington Working Act. For those in our community who may not be familiar with this is a vital state law that draws a clear line between local policing and federal immigration enforcement and ensures our officers remain focused on local public safety by prohibiting them from inquiring about a person's immigration status or detaining someone on behalf of federal immigration authorities. So I just want to, once again, my sincere thanks to our city staff for their leadership on this. Thank you.
Councilmember Parks.
Thank you. Bobby Ryder with the DPA could not be here tonight, but she asked me to mention a few things, and she just said, just talk about the DPA. I said, well, okay. The biggest thing is the farmers market is growing and very popular with a lot of people. It happens every Saturday morning from 9 to 1. There's live music, there's fresh produce and fruit, but there's also food. There are also food vendors there as well. And it's in the parking lot behind the U.S. Bank building, technically on Paradise. So also at that farmers market, the Wheelan Grange is supporting a program called Farm Bucks. They give $5 in farm bucks to children who are 13 or under, and then they can go and purchase whatever they'd like at the farmer's market that day, and then the Grange reimburses those. They reimburse the vendors who accepted those farm bucks, so I think that's pretty fun too. Our Downtown Pullman Association, if you're not aware, we are now a Main Street community or organization, and that really opens a lot of doors for us to apply and receive more funding. So that's a very, very big thing for us. Also, we are the Economic Vitality Committee. There are several committees, and the Economic Vitality Committee or Development met today for the first time, and we talked about a lot of exciting things about how to, what to do about the vacant spaces downtown, and instead of just working on filling them, maybe we should look at the cause of why they are vacant. So we're working on that. We'd like to somehow make space or create space for an incubator space so that college students or home business people could be downtown working on their projects. So just a little bit of what's going on. You can go to downtownpullman.org to see more and find out more about the Downtown Pullman Association. Thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
No comment.
Councilmember Guido.
No comment.
Councilmember Weller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the comment regarding the parking. That was actually brought to my attention because I know you've done it for many, many years by another organization who had been fined. And so I think it is a good point, And, if the council feels that we should bring that up and discuss it, I'm all for it. I think just like watering on off days or any other, situation we face in the city, sometimes it is told to us, and then we bring it up to the mayor or, department heads, and so that's a part of our responsibility. But I definitely do appreciate it. I'm sure it is a great economic boost and creates great community for your church. I've known several that go there, and I know they enjoy it. So I appreciate you bringing it up, and feel free to contact me anytime. And I walk by your church every day and hear the music. I was just hearing the music the other day, and it sounds like a lot of fun, and I'd like to see how we can do that for you. So thank you for that. The other thing I did want to mention was I've had some questions because after the fireworks discussion, people have asked, well, I thought we were going to be hearing about this on City and through City website or social media when those things occurred. I had brought this up to the mayor, and he had explained to me, and I wanted to make sure, so that's why I had checked with him, that was brought up as something and I want to make sure I have it right on the email here, that I had made the suggestion related to communication for him to consider, and that those suggestions are being considered, but it will not be implemented at this time. There is a communications plan that once Sean is on board, that things will be looked at in that way and prioritized. So I appreciated the mayor answering my questions about this. And as I mentioned before, I feel it's a very low-hanging fruit for us to be able to communicate when these things occur. I think the events that we have and the amount we have a certain capacity for our communications person. And it's difficult because for me, I feel the base communications such as something like fireworks or announcements like that are very, very important. And I've been told that some things have gone by the wayside, like announcement on fires in our area as well, and that there's only a certain capacity and communication can't address that. We're putting a lot of effort towards communication for some of these events, which I think the events are great, but I think we need to deal with the very base, and that is communicating safety and communicating noise. That's my personal opinion. I didn't have anything prepared on this, but I was thinking about it as I was coming over here. It is the mayor's pleasure to decide what and how things are announced in the city. And so I just wanted to explain that to the public who have been communicating me about why is this not being done? Why are we not hearing about, one, the fires, and two, fireworks? So that's an explanation. I'll leave it at that for right now. Thank you.
Councilmember DeLira?
No comment.
Next item up is City Council request for future agenda items. Is there anybody who would like to request a future agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on to community comments on final action items. This agenda is the second of two opportunities during the meeting for public to bring comments to the attention of elected officials on any agenda item that City Council will take final action item at the meeting, excluding items where public comment was previously accepted. This exclusion extends to prior public hearings. Final action items include confirmation appointments, consent agenda items, and regular agenda items. This agenda item for comments will not exceed 30 minutes in total. Comments will be directed to the mayor and council as a body, and no comments should be directed to an individual council member. Is there anyone who would like to provide community comments on any final action items for the agenda? Seeing none, we will then move on to the consent agenda. The items listed on the consent agenda are considered to be routine in nature and will be enacted by a single motion of the City Council without separate discussion. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to read the consent agenda by title only.
So move.
Second.
And a second. With that, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, if you could please read the consent agenda.
Sure. The first item is a motion to dispense with the reading of the August 26, 2025 meeting minutes and approve them as submitted. Item 2, a motion to approve disbursements for accounts payable checks numbered 2011-31745 through 2011-31915, totaling $996,299.85. And finally, item 3, a motion to approve disbursements for electronic transfers numbered 425 through 433, 436 through 440, and 448 through 457, totaling $1,274,489.92.
Do any council members desire to have any items removed from the consent agenda but to discuss separately? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Second. With that, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. Up to our first regular agenda item. The first one is a motion authorizing the submission of a grant. And with that, we have R.J. Lauder, Community Development Director.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. This item on your agenda is the request of staff to move forward with a grant application offered by the Washington State Department of Commerce called the CHIP grant, which is an acronym for Connecting Housing to Infrastructure program. The CHIP program connects affordable housing projects to utility systems, and grant funding can reimburse associated costs such as water and sewer line upsizing, water and sewer line extensions, and other utility upgrades. This grant application is due September 26th, 2025. Staff was approached by Nils Peterson with the Hills and Rivers Housing Trust to work together to collaborate and have the city act as an agent on this application. So with that, the city would like to, city staff would like to have the city council give us the go-ahead on this grant application. The city staff sees this as a unique collaborative opportunity to make progress toward one of the city council's long-term priority areas and comprehensive plan goals of increasing access to affordable housing. I want to make a note that the decision to apply for the grant does not imply or constitute approval of any other proposed housing development needs or applications such as zoning, permitting, or other review processes. The project identified by by Nils and his group will be on Main and Elm, Southwest Main and Elm. If there's any questions I can answer, I'm available, and so is Nils, who happens to be in the crowd this evening.
Any questions for RJ? Councilmember Guido?
It's not so much a question, but just a comment. I want to thank Nils Peterson for coming forward and presenting this opportunity to the city of Pullman, as it does align with one of our goals around affordable and attainable housing, making those more available, and this project would do so. I'm excited about the grant opportunity to help augment the cost of such a project with helping with the critical infrastructure as well. Since I do serve on the Hills and Rivers Board of Directors, I'll recuse myself when it comes time to vote for this, but I think it's very much an exciting opportunity, and grateful to have Hills and Rivers looking to Pullman to start developing these kinds of opportunities.
Any other questions? If not, I'd then entertain a motion. Councilman.
Move to authorize the submittal of a grant application to the Washington State Department of Commerce for the Connecting Housing to Infrastructure Program for Affordable Housing.
There's a second, and with that, discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And any abstained? One abstain. Okay. The second item up is we have Jeff Albrecht, our interim city administrator, for just a few more days left. So it's been good having you in this position, Jeff.
Thank you. Good evening, Council. What's before you is, I think as most of you are aware, the Gladys Center will be closing next Monday, and on fairly short notice for some of the tenants there. So after some discussion with staff, we realized that we did have a small space available at Old City Hall that's not currently being used, has longer-term needs for the city, but currently didn't have a need for the city. And that might be a space that could service as a short-term transition for some of those tenants of the Gladys while they try to identify a permanent location to relocate to. So what we have before you is asking staff to authorize either myself or the mayor to enter into short-term leases with any of those that may be interested and need a space while they transition and find the permanent location. This is designed to be short-term. We're not looking to get into the space rental business. That's not what we're trying to do. This is literally just kind of a bridge space for these. So the general terms, basically what we provide them is obviously space, Wi-Fi access. We wouldn't provide them telecommunications. We wouldn't provide them those types of things. The cost would be $1.50 per square foot with no additional costs for utilities and anything that would be built in. And the leases could start as soon as the space is ready, which we're hoping could be as early as the next few days, and would run no later than November 15th. So by November 15th, they would need to find a different location. We would allow them to break the lease at any points without penalty. They would just pay. So if they, for example, moved in on September 15th and October 1st, they found a space, we would prorate them and charge them for that rate. If they needed it for the full 2 months roughly through November 15th, we would just bill them at the end for whatever they used. So we obviously can't give away space. This is a reasonable cost that we believe is affordable, covers kind of the city's costs of things like utilities and those types of things, and hopefully is something that may benefit at least a few of those tenants to kind of make sure they have a plan to get something permanent. So with that, I would answer any questions.
Any questions? Councilmember Wright?
Just a quick question, Jeff. When this was initially run out there, was there indeed a cost associated with this, or has there always been the $1.50 per square foot as the cost?
The $1.50 per square foot is basically similar to what a lot of them are paying currently. It's also kind of similar to market, and again, allows us to offer space without. So that's, I don't know if we offered a dollar amount. When we first reached out to entities, we said there would be a cost. I don't think when we very first reached out, we determined that. I think we said a cost comparable to what they were paying now is what we had shared.
Okay, thank you. Just needed to have that cleared up.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Councilmember Parks?
Thank you. I just want to express appreciation so much for the city for offering this space. I spoke with Sean Miller very shortly while actually the closure was in development, and asked him about Old City Hall. And so, and I'm sure others did too. But to have that space available for the city to reach out to businesses and nonprofits in such a short time, and to turn things around so quickly and make it happen, that is how you find your way to yes. So I thank everybody very much for all the help with that?
I have to give credit. A lot of staff were involved in discussions to even decide if this was feasible, and I got to give credit to a lot of staff stepped forward and did some extra effort just to make sure we could offer this.
Councilmember Fajarin?
Thank you, and thank you, Jeff. How many tenants are you expecting to take advantage of this opportunity?
We don't know for sure. It's possible it might be none. At this point, we have one that sounds extremely interested and probably two that are, I think, somewhat interested. I would guess at the end of the day, we're probably somewhere between 1 and 3. But we don't know for sure yet. It could be a few more. And of course, there's some tenants that we just can't, meet their needs. So there is a few of those. So, but I would guess we're probably somewhere in the 1 to 3 or 4 is probably what it will end up being, would be my guess. But it's possible that they're all looking for current spaces, and Sean Miller's helping them identify permanent spaces in the community. So if they're able to identify that, they may not choose to take advantage of this.
Thank you.
Councilmember Weller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How many businesses or organizations are going to be displaced, do you know, by the closure?
I don't have the exact number. I believe Sean Miller said 14, 16, somewhere in there. Now, some of those are like once-a-month meeting groups, so they're not like a regular, tenant. A lot of the tenants in there are not a 5-day-a-week entity. But I think it was either 14 or 16 total. And that was everything from the roller derby group, which obviously they can't meet in City Hall, to just some of the small nonprofits or even for-profit businesses. So Sean has been, even the ones that don't have the opportunity to, a City Hall wouldn't meet the needs, Sean has been trying to work with all those groups to help them identify space in the community somewhere else.
Thank you.
If no further discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve the authorization of the mayor and director of finance and administrative services to enter into a short-term lease agreement for space at Old City Hall.
Second.
Second. With that, any discussion? Councilmember Fajarin?
I'll just mention that since I am a paying tenant for Gladish, I will abstain from this vote.
With that, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain?
Aye.
So 1 abstain. Thank you very much, Jeff. Next up is a motion to adopt the 2026 City of Pullman legislative priorities. This is something that, as a council, you've been working on for a few meetings, you've had a chance to provide input for a couple different meetings, and this is being brought back for final discussion. And with that, first of all, are there any questions related to the agenda and related to this? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion for adopting the 2026 City of Pullman legislative priorities.
A motion adopting the 2026 City of Pullman legislative priorities.
Second.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. With that, we're moving into discussion items, and I'm going to, first of all, let Jeff start and kind of frame this discussion and what this is we're working toward.
Sure. So before we kind of dive into the items, just to give council a little bit more background, we've had some discussions about abilities to have more discussion and interaction before we get to a vote on something or before we get to final action on something. And a lot of public entities, school boards, public hospital districts, city councils will kind of use what they call work sessions. And typically a work session is, it is an open public meeting. So anyone can still attend just like they would any other meeting. But they're really designed to be kind of more of an educational discussion. Typically, there is no action taken at those meetings, which is a little bit different today. We still had a regular meeting, but they're typically non-action meetings. And what it really does is it allows staff to kind of receive input, have discussions prior to taking action. Depending on what it is, it may come back as a future action item or not, but then typically if it does come back as an action item, it becomes much more simpler. You've already done the discussion and kind of had a chance to let staff work through those issues. So the hope is that this is kind of a trial, so this truly isn't a true work session, but it's kind of a trial where we're going to just have some discussion items, maybe a little bit more of an informal discussion that may or may not, again, lead to action in the future. And we'd like to gladly receive input, and if this is something that council feels like is beneficial, then we would actually probably next year schedule these in maybe quarterly or something along those lines, where we'd build in actual work sessions as a regular part of the schedule. So we'll gladly take some input, after the meeting on how you think it goes, but this is kind of a bit of a hybrid chance to try that out. So I just wanted to give that introduction before we dive into the topics.
Okay, so the first topic, we have RJ Lott, Community Development Director.
Thank you, Mayor, again, and good evening, council, once again. I'm excited for this possible new format. We get a chance to work through some issues that deserve a little bit more time. So on the first one this evening, I'm here to talk a little bit more about short-term rentals. Short-term rentals were adopted by the City Council on May 13th of this year and was Ordinance 25-08, which became Pullman City Code 17.109. I'll start with some definitions this evening. The first two are located within our city code. The first one, pretty straightforward, defines what short-term is in terms of short-term rentals, which simply means 30 consecutive nights or fewer per rental transaction. The second one on this slide defines what an eligible dwelling is for a short-term rental. Those can be a single-family dwelling, a duplex, an accessory dwelling unit, a tiny home, a townhouse, or a manufactured home. Short-term rentals are not permitted in a building with 3 or more dwellings, as these can constitute a change of use under the International Building Code. The second half of this slide describes the state definition as identified in RCW 6437, and I'll just focus on the first one, which reads, a dwelling unit that is occupied by the owner of at least 6 months during the calendar year, and which fewer than 3 rooms are rented at any one time. For this code, we looked at short-term rentals to be applied on a consistent basis. So all short-term rentals are viewed the same, whether they are occupied by the owner at any fraction of a year or not. This allows for safety purposes because short-term rentals can create an occupancy that is transient in nature, and that brings a higher hazard occupancy. There's also no guarantee that an owner is present during any one rental. The intent of the recent updates to the STR code, as adopted by the council back in May, the highlights here: easier, quicker, less costly application process for short-term rental operators. There's an increase in STR availability to all residentially zoned areas, which I'll get to here in a moment. The code complies with state of Washington laws under RCW 6437, which was adopted by the state back in 2019. And lastly, as I just mentioned, an increase in safety for those who utilize short-term rentals. I'll highlight some of the processes that staff went through along with the Planning Commission prior to adopting Ordinance 25-08. 8 community meetings were hosted by city staff at locations and dates as you can see here. Those lasted approximately 2 hours each. That allowed community members to attend and provide comments, not just on short-term rental code updates, but on the whole code process entirely. This next slide highlights the Planning Commission meetings starting in May of 2024 and ending in February of 2025, and the approximate length of those meetings. Now, the conversation did not focus primarily on short-term rentals, although it did cover the entire code update. Short-term rental code was the #1 topic considered during those times, but I want to make a note that that was not the case throughout the entire meeting. And I would like to add, going back a slide if I could, the Planning Commission did vote unanimous to forward the code to the council with a recommendation of adoption or approval. The previous processing of short-term rental via conditional use permit, which was the previous way we used to do this prior to May of 2025, application fee was $500. This utilizes the Pullman hearing examiner, which is done virtually the third Monday of each month. Complete application materials were due into staff at least 30 days prior to that hearing examiner meeting. Community development staff produces a staff report. Public noticing was required, and so was a public hearing, allowing those in favor and in opposition to comment during the hearing examiner meeting. The current processing of short-term rentals is now via an administrative decision. Application fee is now $200, remembering that it was $500 and is now $200. This is a one-time fee with no annual renewal. Application materials can be processed immediately via our online portal, which is now up and running for almost a year now. There's no need to wait for a scheduled hearing examiner date. There's no public hearing or public notice prior to approval. No additional required changes to off-street parking other than the underlying zone requirements. This means that if a home already meets parking requirements, if they wish to do a short-term rental, there's no additional parking required. Short-term rental applications can be reviewed by staff as soon as the same day as they are submitted, and inspections by building inspectors can be scheduled as quickly as the following day. So if someone comes forward to us via the online portal and has everything ready to go, an inspection could be done the following afternoon. Short-term rentals in the R1 minimum density residential district. This opens up the availability of short-term rentals in areas that were not previously permitted. So prior to May of 2025, short-term rentals were not allowed in the R1 district. The R1 residential zone is approximately 1,300 acres and includes approximately 1,573 units. So short-term rentals are now available in all residential zones. I have the next 4 slides are maps of each hill in Pullman. I'd like to thank GIS staff for putting this together for me. They really did an excellent job. This first map is for Military Hill. The tan or lighter shade represents the R1 zone, meaning that the units within this area are now available for short-term rentals, and this includes about 382 units in the R1 zone on Military Hill, now available for short-term rentals. College Hill has relatively low amount of R1 zoning and includes approximately 82 units. Sunnyside Hill R1 zoning, approximately 537 units now available for short-term rentals. Pioneer Hill R1 zoning, 572. As I mentioned earlier, the state of Washington adopted RCW 6437 back in 2019. There are 5 components to that RCW: definitions, taxes, consumer safety, short-term rental platforms, and liability insurance. So talking about licenses, taxes, and insurance, Washington State business license is required to operate a short-term rental under state law. There is no City of Pullman business license requirement. Lodging taxes, which promotes tourism, must be paid under RCW 6728 and Pullman City Code 6.93. All other local, state, and federal taxes still apply. Liability insurance is required by the state in the aggregate of not less than $1 million. RCW 6437-030 as it relates to consumer safety. These relate to short-term rentals across the state and requires short-term rental operators who offer dwelling units or portions thereof must provide contact information who will respond to inquiries during the length of any one stay, provide the rental is in compliance with RCW 1927-530 and state building council, code council regulations regarding carbon monoxide alarms. Also requires the posting of the following in a conspicuous location: the short-term rental address. Many short-term rental occupants don't know the address in case of an emergency. This helps with that. Emergency contact information for police, fire, or medical services. A floor plan with fire exits and escape routes. Maximum occupancy limits. And contact information for the operator or designated contact. When it comes to City of Pullman requirements for safety inspections, they include the following, and we looked through many cities throughout the states to look and see what they did or do in terms of short-term rentals, and we considered that as we looked at this along with the Planning Commission. A fire extinguisher is required to be mounted in an accessible location. Carbon monoxide detectors installed in accordance with 2021 International Residential Code, essentially being outside of each sleeping room, evacuation route posted in a conspicuous location. Smoke detectors installed in accordance with the same International Residential Code, pretty much located exactly where a carbon monoxide detector would be. And an emergency egress light in the largest room. Light shall have backup battery in case of power failure. So here's some examples of what that is. Simply what it can be is a flashlight purchased for $10 to $15 plugged into the wall, and when the power no longer runs, the flashlight will illuminate and will help in an emergency evacuation or egress if needed. So here are some examples that would work under our inspections. Inspections by the building inspectors usually last 15 to 20 minutes, so they're quite quick. Enforcement of short-term rental. Community development staff has contacted STR operators who had previous conditional use permits to ensure continued compliance. We've contacted most of them, and they've been in contact with us, getting them up to speed on what's required. Short-term rental operators who did not have a previous permit would only be contacted by staff after a complaint was received. Enforcement of Pullman City Code for short-term rentals falls under Code 1710-090. However, the ultimate goal of staff is to educate and gain compliance from operators rather than the issuance of citations. We have not issued any citations under this new code. We really don't want to. We want to have those short-term rental operators contact us, work with us, so we can make sure that we can get them up to speed with local code as well as state RCW code. So in summary, the current Pullman City Code allows for short-term rental operators or operations to be processed in a manner that is faster, simplifies the application, is safer, and is more economical. The short-term rental structures are now occupied at a higher level of safety than before. Short-term rentals can be available in more locations throughout the city. And lastly, short-term rentals are in compliance with all applicable Washington state laws. Are there any questions I can answer at this time?
So any questions? Councilmember Wright?
So RJ, I didn't see in your presentation what actually triggered the review of short-term rentals for the Planning Commission. How did that start?
Yes, that's a great question. So as we looked at our code throughout Title 17, that included short-term rentals, and they used an antiquated code such as bed and breakfast or other terms which really, quite honestly, are not used anymore. Short-term rental is the new terminology these days. So that was one of the items that we wanted to look at. Two, we wanted to make sure that they were meeting the state requirements for business license, safety, and those type of things. So as part of Title 17, this was included in that. So it was part of the overall code work throughout the zoning code.
Okay, so there wasn't one particular item that triggered the review of short-term rentals. It was just part of the code that was being reviewed to start with.
Correct.
Okay.
Councilmember Guido.
RJ, so I just saw on social media today someone saying, you know, I want to rent my room, and under the new city code, I would have to put a big lighted exit sign in my room that I'm renting. Is that correct?
No. What they can do is, as I mentioned before, purchase a flashlight, $10 to $15 at a local retailer, which you can plug into the wall, so when the power cuts out, the flashlight illuminates. I think it's a good idea overall, but it also allows for those who are unfamiliar with the building to find an exit and safely exit the building in case of an emergency.
And follow-up question. So are we requiring anything above and beyond the Washington law in terms of safety?
The only thing that would be that exit light or the flashlight.
Okay.
That would be the only thing. And in conversations with the building official through planning commission meetings, he indicated that that would help in the case of an emergency such as a fire. For someone who's, like I said, unfamiliar with the structure, would be able to exit safely.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Weller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So RJ, two questions. And maybe this is more, I don't know, philosophical than anything. Is there a reason why, you know, we have a lot of rentals here? And people have asked, well, rentals aren't held to the same standard. And so your thoughts on that? And the second question would be, do you know how many buildings, well, homes, are renting out, just say, like a room in comparison to a totally separate home that they're renting out as far as an STR, looking at those numbers? And I will admit, and we've talked, and you know my feelings, I respect you, I respect Ariel, and all the work that's gone in. A shotgun approach, in my opinion, of a room being rented out for somebody who's living in the location, and, you know, a totally separate home is kind of a it's overly controlling. So I'd like your thoughts on how many, as I already said, why aren't we doing the same thing for regular rentals? And then also how many you think are renting out just a room versus an entire, you know, building?
Quite a few questions there. Let me see if I can answer them the best that I recall. So I believe your first question was, do we have a need for short-term rentals in the city? Absolutely. Obviously we have events that bring in thousands of folks, primarily WSU events. So absolutely there is a need for those in our community. To answer one of your other questions, the difference between a single bedroom being rented versus an entire home, there are some differences there, and there's also some similarities. The similarities is that a renter does not know the way out of a building in case of an emergency. Some would say that if the owner or the agent is there on site, it would be less of a hazard, and that's true. However, there's no guarantee or requirement that the owner is there in the building during a football weekend. So to help in the case of an emergency, and we've had recent residential fires, one of them was tragic, and I don't want to have that occur again. This would help mitigate those safety issues. I don't want another tragic event. Other questions that you had?
So I think maybe I mixed things up. Okay, so your thoughts on just like a regular rental, like a renting, you know, like a company, a rental company.
Okay.
You know, we're requiring this for STRs, but it's so much different for like a rental company. And I am not advocating we do this to rentals. I'm just asking your thoughts on that. And then how many do you know of the single-room STRs we have versus actual full buildings in our city, if you know.
To answer the question about single rooms versus entire homes, don't know the numbers on that. That would be hard to calculate or track down. We'd have to go through listings on almost a daily basis to see when they're available. They're hard to calculate when they're not available because they don't appear on online platforms for those rentals. I think the main difference, to answer your other question, between short-term rentals and rentals that exceed 30 days is the unfamiliarity of transient folks as they enter a home or a room for a short amount of time in the case of an emergency. So they need to know what the address is, where's a fire extinguisher, make sure that there's an escape route known, light in case there's smoke, in case of a fire, those type of things, whereas a long-term renter would know those over time. So if someone comes into town for a weekend, they may not have the time or the ability to familiarize themselves with their surroundings in case of a nighttime emergency.
Councilmember Fitzgerald.
Thank you, RJ. I just kind of want to go back to one question I had regarding where our code may go beyond what's required for the state. And just a question there, does the state have any occupancy limits for short-term rentals? Because I know that our current code has occupancy rentals based on the number of sleeping rooms in the rental unit.
The state does not identify those. However, to keep a congruent residential feel in a neighborhood and to prevent overcrowding or over occupancy, we did put limits of 2 per bedroom plus 2 in a common area. So if you have a 3-bedroom house, you could have up to 8 individuals.
Thank you.
Councilmember Jalira.
Thank you so much, RJ, for your presentation. So it sounds like the first point of contact was through a letter to the STR operators who had conditional permits. Would those letters be considered warning in the enforcement sense before the 200 fee a day begins on January 1st?
No. So we would go through the entire process. And like I mentioned, we don't want to cite people. We just want to work with them. And if they're working in good faith to get into compliance with our code, we're not going to issue citations.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wright.
I have several questions, and I was just going to kind of do a round robin, but I can ask away if that's okay with you. What other cities were looked at during this process to get an idea of what their protocols were in terms of short-term rentals? Because I don't think this is a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
No, absolutely not. And that's a great question. So work with staff and the Planning Commission. We looked at a wide number of cities throughout the state. Pullman's unique in a number of ways, which we all know. So we tried to craft a code that fit our needs. Some of the cities in the state vary wildly on how they enforce short-term rentals. Some don't allow them in residential areas at all. Some cities allow them with no restrictions. So, and then there's 300 cities in between those. So we looked at a wide variety and tried to compare those communities with Pullman to come up with the best fit. So to answer your question, we looked at many, almost too many to list really, to try to find what worked best for our community.
Okay. Should I keep going? Okay. So my next question has to do with the Planning Commission process. And in making the recommendation to council from the Planning Commission, I'm interested as to whether or not, this is a difficult question because there were so many items part of the ordinances that we looked at in May, but I'm curious as to what the level of concurrence was from the commission. Was it a unanimous recommendation to council? Were there dissenters? And was there a lot of discussion?
Ultimately, it was a unanimous recommendation. Working through the process, there was a lot of conversations between staff and the Planning Commission, to try to get to a consensus. But ultimately, it was a unanimous decision to move forward with a recommendation to approve to the City Council.
Okay. Okay, and I may have one or two more. Can I keep going? Okay. I've been storing these up for a while. I think since we're here at this juncture right now, this resulted from a complaint that was initiated maybe, about a month or so ago, that then generated a whole series of letters that went out to existing operators that were identified not to be in compliance as initiated by the first complainant. So my question going forward is, what is the complaint process? And secondly, is there an appeal process in place that an operator can have some recourse if they don't necessarily agree with the nature of the complaint?
Great question again. I'll start with the appeals. Anything in Title 17 can be appealed if it's an administrative decision to the hearing examiner. So that's always an option. The complaint that we received identified other short-term rentals throughout the city that did not have a permit or were not working towards a permit, and we reached out to those as part of that. The complaint listed online portals which we could identify who those individuals were. The complaint essentially is that that individual went through the process where others did not, and we followed up with them via letter, which you reference, and really want to work with them to get them into compliance over the next 90 days. We don't want to get into, like I mentioned, the citations. We really just want to get compliance, get them towards a permit, and then be done.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. And lastly, but then I do have a couple of comments. Who's doing the inspections, and how can we ensure that these inspections are indeed consistent from inspector to inspector? Because that always kind of seems to come up, that we don't have a lot of consistency there.
Yes, building inspectors do the inspections. Like I mentioned, they take about 15 to 20 minutes. They're relatively quick, and they have a checklist that is uniform regardless of who is doing the inspections. And I've gone over the checklist with them, and each individual item, mostly the safety items that I've mentioned here this evening, are individually listed, and they check it when it's there, and they move on to the next one. So it's consistent throughout.
Okay. And I guess the jury could still be out on that since we maybe haven't had a lot of inspections yet? Is that the case?
That's a great question again. We've had 13 inspections, 13 permits issued since May. 9 more are in the works, and the feedback that we've gotten, both planning staff and building inspectors, have been very positive, mostly with people saying to us, this process was smoother than I anticipated. The inspection was quicker than I thought it would be. So all the feedback, once they've applied and been in contact with us, has been very positive.
Okay, that's good to know. Now, my last question is, did we consider existing operators being grandfathered into the process? If they had already been approved for a short-term rental, but not under these guidelines, was there any provision made for those people that they could just continue as they had been, or would they have to change to come up to code or to come up to compliance without having done anything else?
We reached out to those who already had permits that were previously approved, and at no additional cost, they didn't have to reapply. We reached out to them and said, here's some state codes for safety. We want to make sure that you're at least following those. And we've gone through that process with them, and like I mentioned, the feedback has been very positive. Most of those short-term rentals have a majority of the items already done because they want to do it the right way. So it wasn't that big of a process with the previous short-term rental operators to get them up to speed.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate your help.
Councilmember Weller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to return to something that Tremaine had brought up. And that was that there's a difference between if you live in a building, in the home, versus if you don't. And that those regulations, especially in other cities, were not as restrictive, were not as, but we are grouping it all in one. And I keep coming back to this. I think the majority of buildings, and I don't have the numbers because you don't have the numbers, the majority of homes, and from people that I've heard from, are mom and pop or retired individuals or even working families who are trying to get by renting a single room. And they live in that building or that home. So I think for me, it's kind of two ways. Yes, the safety, and I understand your concerns about the fire situation, but I also understand that people who are living in the home will take their tenants on a walk around to their home, showing them exits and so on and so forth. So I'm just kind of, it irks me a little bit because I know Tremaine had brought this up and it was kind of shoved off as well. This is just the way we're doing it. And I don't like that because I've met a lot of these people and they're not people that are trying to get away with, being illegal with their homes. And so I'm merely talking to you about this and continuing to kind of ask why we're doing the shotgun approach and the idea that people won't know where they're living at for that brief amount of time, or they won't know how to get out of a home. It doesn't settle with me right. And anyone who's been in a new a new apartment can understand they won't know where they're living, for a while themselves. So I'm kind of speaking, I don't know that there's so much a question, but I'm trying to process in my own mind, and I tend to do that unfortunately out loud, gets me into trouble. But this really it doesn't sit right with me. So I don't like the shotgun approach. So anyways.
Councilmember DeLira?
Quiet.
I have one more question, just from hearing everyone speak, mostly around the fee starting January 1st. What is the $250 a day penalty based on, and how was that decided on, and is that something that could be potentially changed?
Yes, if the city council wants to amend the code that has that fee listed, that is an option to the city council. It's itemized in our code under Title 17 with infractions.
Councilmember Parks?
Thank you. I actually appreciate the safety inspection regulations. I think that, honestly, any homeowner should have these in some way. And I've actually been in a hotel room where the fire alarm outside went off, and I wake up, and in that moment, you're bleary-eyed. You don't always know where the door is. Yeah, I mean, we meet as quickly as you would think, and I mean, I don't have any problems with slide 16 at all. I think that makes sense. And I think a lot of people are envisioning like the big exit signs, like the green ones over there. And it isn't that at all. It's just a small light that, honestly, I think any homeowner, any rental should have all of these things. My concern is more with the enforcement side. And you and I have visited about this already, but I didn't like that the first operator who had a complaint filed then said, well, you should look at them and them and all these people. To me, the complaint-driven enforcement should be from the residents in the area. So the music's too loud, I can't park in front of my house, or whatever it is. I don't think that, it's much like parenting, right? You scold one child and then they say, well, but yeah, they did it too. Yeah, but what do we say? We say we're not talking about that right now, you know? So I know you had the information and probably we felt like needed to follow up on that, but maybe a phone call or, I don't know. We've just heard a lot of discontent with that. And going forward, you know, I just hope that it's, I mean, if this, however this ends up, I think that just, you know, making it clear that, hey, if someone's has an Airbnb and it's a lot of nuisance, then definitely let us know. I don't believe we've had a lot of complaints in the past for our Airbnbs. I know several people who operate them, and they know what to do, and they do it well. That's not to say that everybody does, but so I appreciate the revising and the relooking at it, but I do want it to remain. I don't want it to be targeting small businesses, cottage industry people, like Councilmember Weller said, retired people whose kids are gone. So we could be doing it. You know, things like that. I just think that, yes, we need rules, we need safety, but we don't, I hope we don't have to be real heavy-handed with it.
Great point, and that's not the intent of staff. We don't want to be punitive. We want to work with the folks that have short-term rentals. Call, email, come in, have us go out there. We're more than welcome to work with individuals to help get them up to speed. Once again, code enforcement not intended to be punitive. It's to help get them into compliance, as with everything else we have in our code.
Me again.
Councilmember Wright?
Not to be argumentative at all, but that is kind of contrary to what some of the complaints have been that we have received, as far as, you know, operators are feeling like that there's been more of a punitive approach to how they have been dealt with through this at least initial spate of incidents that were triggered by that one event. The other thing, and I was very strong about this when we first voted on these ordinances back in May, and I felt that because of the fact that we had 3 vacant positions on council at that time, that we should have at least deferred that decision until those seats were filled by the newly electeds. And that vote ended up to be, there were 2 dissenters on that, myself and Nathan, and the ordinance passed. I think it was a 4-6 vote. I, for one, would like to at least have the opportunity to have that revisited by the newly electeds after the first of the year. And so at the very least, what I would hope to have us see tonight is that we possibly could look at a 90 to a 120-day moratorium before enforcement occurs, whether or not we continue with this ordinance as is presented tonight, or if the council may choose to amend it. I think we have some things to consider. There are some operators who have said they're not, these regulations are too hard. I'm not going to do this anymore. And if I do it, I'm not going to tell anybody I'm going to do it. So we have the chance of losing some spots for people, at least through this time frame where we need STR operators because of football games and the financial impact of that, and bringing tourism in and all of those kinds of things. As well as the fact then that we would have the opportunity to have our newly electeds look at this with fresh eyes and see if there maybe are some things that, albeit your presentation was great, but throughout this, to have fresher eyes look at it and see what kinds of things we may have missed. So I know that this is just discussion, but I also know that it's possible that we could take action on this should the rest of the council feel that that's a direction they want to go. So I think I'm done.
Councilmember Weller?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm in favor of what Councilmember Wright said. I would also like to ask you just one more question. So I was just kind of doing some quick looking up here. In Seattle, the per unit regulatory license is $75. In Tacoma, it's $104 for 1 year. It's for 1 year. And I would just like to also bring up, I've heard from some planning commission members that, and you and I have talked about this, and I talked to the mayor about this, and some of them felt very pressured to agree with the rest. And when they had voiced severe objections. And, when I talked to them, I explained, well, you're the gatekeepers. When you vote in unanimous, you send a message to the council that we're all in agreement. And that makes us be like, okay, they've done their job.
Excuse me, with that, Thad?
Sorry?
I just wanted to point out that RJ didn't adopt this ordinance, the city council did. And so I just want to stand up for staff here, that this wasn't RJ's idea. This ordinance was passed by the city council. So I just want to remind the city council of that. He's taken a lot of hits and having to justify something that the city council has already adopted.
Okay, well, I didn't think I was giving you hits. RJ and I have talked about this before. My apologies if so. So I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry, Thad, that I led to that, feeling. RJ, I appreciate what you're doing. Same with Ariel. And I've said that a number of times. And I think if you go back the 17 years that I've been on council, along with a lot of us, we have thanked staff a number of times. And we show up in defense of them. I have taken, and I know RJ knows this, and other staff know this, hits after hits after hits online in defense of the city. So much that I have been told that I am the Pullman cheerleader. So I want to make it clear that I am here, and I am getting emotional, so I want to make it clear it's also my job to be able to ask the questions and express support. So what I'm doing is doing what I was elected to do. And so, as I said, some of the Planning Commission members have expressed that they felt pressured. Not necessarily by you.
You're making, so that's what he was referencing, is you're making, their vote is their vote. And
it is their vote.
It is their vote, and you're passing on third-hand comments relating to pressure that you're stating that you felt staff was making.
No, I was saying pressure by possibly other committee members, feeling pressure. So that's not okay for me to express that they have expressed to me?
They voted unanimously to recommend this to the city council. I think regardless of if they voted against their heart or what they felt was right, then that's not RJ's fault.
I didn't say it was RJ's fault.
Or anybody else's fault. That was their individual vote, and that's how it came out. So, I mean,
I don't think...
You can, Nathan, I'm not trying to tell you you can't say anything. You can say whatever you want. I'm just standing up for staff because he's taking the heat for an ordinance that was just passed by this council.
I understand.
This council that's seated right now, not someone who might get on the council in 3 months, this very council. And that's all I'm saying. Say your piece.
I feel what you're saying. What you're saying is valid. And I appreciate what you're telling me. I do think it is important. I was a dissenting vote. So I think it's important for me to express what was expressed to me by committee members. This doesn't mean it's coming from RJ. It means it's coming from the pressure of being on the committee, and I am merely expressing that. And so it's, and again, I apologize if you feel like you're getting hit. RJ, I love you, bud. We've talked. I think we've been good. And so this is not about staff. This is about something that people have mixed feelings on, even the people on the Planning Commission. So
with that, Councilmember Guido.
So I don't think it's our job to second guess what a committee that spent a lot of time working on recommended to us. And I take issue with the idea that we have to revisit this after we get new council members on, when we did a legitimate vote. And the work that went into looking at that entire comprehensive review would be put out the door because of one issue that has gotten a lot of play. And as far as I can tell, we're in compliance and we're asking for an additional safety measure, which is not gaudy. It is just an additional safety measure. And why it's reached this level, I don't understand. And it dismisses the work of the Planning Commission, which everybody feels pressure, and you'd have to own up to your vote. I don't have any sympathy for that. But it's a slap in the face, personally, I think, to just dismiss that and say we have to do a moratorium because we're hearing that some people don't like that. That's my feeling.
Any other discussion? Councilmember Fajarin?
Are we going to talk, is this to RJ, are we going to talk amongst ourselves afterwards, or?
This is a conversation. I mean, this is a discussion item. There's no action that comes out of this item. This is just a discussion item.
Okay. Well, I will add to that discussion then. I know I've talked to one or two of you, along with other Planning Commission members, and I know we have a lot of feelings, and so I'll just join in on how I see moving forward. I currently struggled with Councilmember Guido's comment about the whole zoning code. It was a massive zoning code, 300 pages, hundreds of pages. It was massive, and STRs were a small part of that, and STRs are a majority, a part of the conversation that we're having right now. So I know we're not doing any action, but what I would propose for discussion is sending just the STR portion of the code back to Planning Committee, strictly the STR portion back to the Planning Committee to address some of the feelings and sentiment and possibly to look it over just one more time. The reason why I voted in favor of it when it first came to us is because it was an up or down or sending it back. And there was a feeling like there was a time crunch that we needed to pass this in order to make a grant. So that's what I'm putting forward, and I'd like to hear other people's thoughts about it.
Councilmember Guido.
I would be supportive of that, your idea, Eric, because I think it needs to be separated out. It does the entire thing in its overall, what it was presented to us does not need to be voted on again or a moratorium. But if this is a particular issue that could be pulled out and ask to be brought back for consideration or a different angle or a different look at it, then I'd be supportive of that.
Councilmember Delera?
If we send it back to the Planning Commission, is there a particular section of the STRs that we are in gripes with, that we're hoping that the Planning Commission might address?
Councilmember Parks?
I think that taking it back to the Planning Commission is being suggested because issues have come up in the community. People have had questions. They have asked, why this, why not that, those sorts of things. So to me, I guess it's a way to give them, to ask them to look at it now that we've gotten some feedback about it by the people who are doing it. And so that's kind of how I would look at that. Not that, oh, we need to change the whole thing, but maybe maybe things can be tweaked to be more in cooperative vein with the operators, if that makes sense. That's how I see it.
Councilmember Wright?
Just to be clear, I was never in favor of changing the entire 300-page ordinance or to review that. My comments are only in regard to the short-term rentals as it pertains to the input that we've gotten from our citizens about this. So I just need to be clear on that. This was not a frivolous discussion to bring up on my part.
So, 1 second. So, Thad, would we need a vote in order to request for Planning Commission to do a review of the short term and then provide information back to us of any changes, or is that something that administratively can do based on the sentiments of the council right now?
Frankly, I'm not sure off the top of my head.
Okay, so this
I don't know if it needs to be repealed.
So what it sounds.
I'm not positive.
Well, what I hear is there's no change to the current ordinance, but they would like for the ordinance to be looked at to see if there's any updates that would be appropriate based on the responses that have come with the ordinance being in place.
Okay, yeah.
And
I would
whether
have to, I
so
can't-
so this is something that we'll need to bring back to the council at a later meeting related to the proper action, whether council needs to do a vote in order to send it back or whether it can administratively be able to go back in that way. Okay, with that, go ahead.
Sorry
Dad.
to interrupt, but I expect it could probably be done the same way it was done before. You could just, council directs staff to revisit it, just like they did when they updated the zoning code.
So is that something that they could just do a vote, or or based on the consent right now, send it back administratively?
I think probably since it was just enacted, it should go to a vote. And it would be helpful. I mean, maybe I haven't been involved in all of the conversations, but if there's specific direction of what the complaints were about, then if it was just a complaint about enforcement, that's pretty difficult. I think there needs to be some direction, like here's the specific issues. Yeah. I think that would be probably helpful for staff to understand what, are we just going back? I guess I think there needs to be more time so that staff has direction, what they're being tasked to do, as opposed to just look at it again.
Yeah, because there'll need to be a direction that way. Councilmember Parks?
Just a point of clarification, this is going back to the Planning Commission, not to staff. Is there a differentiation there?
It goes through staff to the Planning Commission.
Staff, as I understand it, staff has to do the work and then they take it to the Planning Commission. Is that right, RJ?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So it can't be their decision, it's too late to appeal the planning commission's decision because they voted and that time is gone. So
Right.
staff needs to take something to the planning commission. So staff would be doing the work on the revisions, and then those would go to the planning commission for hearings and all of that. Correct me if I'm
That's
wrong.
correct, yeah.
Yeah, and the piece that I would like for council to think about in the midst of this is, so, RJ, do we have more STRs that are in compliance now than previously in May?
Yes.
So we have more that have gone through that process. I don't believe there's a way to tell whether there's more STRs in Pullman at this time versus in May. That's, so one of the statements was there's a potential that there's less. There's not a way to quantify that right now. And I don't believe there's a way to to actually quantify it. So I guess for council, what does council want to accomplish with this reverting back? Is there specific things statements that were made that are concerns? Because our reports that we're getting from staff is that people that are actually coming to the city and going through the process are finding that the process is working very well, and they're actually, in some cases, they've accomplished it in one day. So I'm hearing that two different stories going on right now. Councilmember DeLira?
I personally think that the code is good as is. Planning Commission has done their due diligence, and we've had a chance to review it. I think the only concrete thing that I would maybe consider exploring is maybe the fees, maybe reducing 200 to something else. Maybe the penalty could be less severe for next year. I think that would be the only concrete thing I would like to explore.
Does anyone else have any specific items? If not, what we can do is we can always bring this back at another council meeting, give you time to think about it, and we just bring it back. I kind of see a head nod there.
I was going to say our next council meeting is on the 23rd. I would like to work with maybe one or two other council members to bring something tangible for staff. I do agree that we do need to be specific in what the commission and staff are looking for. You are right about that.
And I'd have to look at the agenda to see whether or not there's time on the 23rd, but we'd work to bring it back. So with that, we'll go ahead and close this part of the discussion, and thank you, RJ. And the next one is related to right-of-way use permit renewal discussion. With that, Sean Wells.
From one tough topic to another. Hi, Sean Wells, Public Works Director here. So this was just a discussion topic. I didn't have a presentation or anything like that. But if you recall back in February 11th of 2025, the right-of-way use code was revamped that changed the mechanisms of how we permit right-of-way use in the city. And it was centered kind of immediately after we were wrapping up the project downtown. We were talking about sidewalk leases in particular, but the code that was adopted amended the existing Pullman City Code 1128 and kind of reenacted new procedures, which included different types of permits, different mechanisms for how we get that process done in those rules. The proposed ordinance at that time, it did contain a section that did not allow for permit renewals. The intent was that if you wanted to continue that occupied space for whatever you were using, you would apply for another permit at the end of that allowed time. And after discussion at that, the council actually, the motion to adopt the proposed ordinance contained an amendment that struck out the section of renewal for permits. We actually adopted the code that had a clause that says we don't renew permits. Now we have no clause to renew them or anything like that at all. And part of that motion also requested that staff develop a renewal process to be brought back for the council. So just as a reminder, we had 3 different types of permits. We had a type A permit, which was type A, B, and C. One was for essentially things that were under 24 hours in use, a one-day event or something like that. The type B permits were up to 72 hours. And then the type C were up to a 1 calendar year. And those were the ones that were primarily related to the sidewalk cafes in the downtown core. And ongoing permits such as Music on Main, where they had this ability to use the space for a long period of time, but like Music on Main, it was for a defined Thursday night for this period, and then next week, and then next week. Up to now, we've had about 25 total right-of-way use permits in the calendar year. 13 of those were the smaller ones, under 24 hours. We had 1 of them that it was the weekend 72-hour permits, and then 11 of them that were the longer type C permits. So based on council's direction to come back and look at this is to figure out how do we look at a renewal process for this. We met with staff. We took a look at, all right, if we were to try to come up with a renewal process, what would that look like? And what we came up with was, what do we need to look at? What are the absolute things that have to be looked at again? First and foremost that came up was the revised certificate of insurance. A lot of the insurance certificates actually expire at the end of the year or the end of that use. And so that would be something that would be needed to look at again. We'd look at the original site plans as well to kind of verify, is that use still okay? Most of the time it would be no change. A sidewalk cafe area, seating area, we've already kind of figured out what those rules are. You have to have this much footage around it, things like that. And so we've established that. If the site plan changed or not, we might necessarily not call it a renewal, but you need a new permit because we have to look at differing things. The dates and times of operations might vary as well. That would be one of the things that they would take a look at. And a very quick, not as detailed inspection just to make sure that, yes, it was set up again in compliance with what the permit constituted there. And so what we were looking at was kind of a dialogue with you tonight about what that process looks like. We think we can come up with a process where it would still be like an online renewal process. The applicant would come in or online and apply for a renewal. They would upload, in practicality, what it would look like for the applicant. They would upload their previously approved site plan, a new certificate of insurance, and any changes to the contact information or the dates and times of the uses, that would also be turned in there. We would like to see that the renewal preferably happen before the expiration of the existing permit, but we would be willing to look at maybe up to a certain period of time, 10 business days is kind of what we were throwing around there. So that if they forgot, it's like, oh, I need to go get that again, I can just do this renewal. And then there can't have had any codes or standards that have changed between the first issuance and the renewal. So the applicant's not going to know that. We're going to know that. Most of the time, like in these, the sidewalk widths that are required aren't changing. Those codes aren't changing too much, if at any. But there would be a bigger deal if that was the case. And we clearly expect that this would not take as long as the first rounds did. And a lot of these initial startups, we had to, nobody done a certificate of insurance like that, so we had some back and forth with those a lot of times, or the site plans themselves, kind of getting everything in play like that. So we do anticipate that the time for staff would be much less than the initial issuance like that. So that's where we're at. If that all sounded kind of amenable, then staff would go back and draft up some revisions to the existing ordinance that's in effect now and come back to you later this year with a proposed plan for that. But I wanted to have that discussion and answer any questions that anybody might have on that.
Councilmember Jalera?
I know one of the main motivations for looking into the renewal process is the hopes that it would be cheaper the second time around someone applies. Will there be maybe numbers floated around the next time we have a discussion on this?
It would. We would come back with a proposed renewal fee, if you will, that would be based on staff time to do the work. My initial calculations are showing that it would almost be a third about of the cost, a third to the half, somewhere in that realm. I got to really fine tune those numbers a little bit, but when just kind of anecdotally talking to staff, they were like, yeah, it's not going to take us that long at all. So it would be anticipated that the renewals would be less.
Councilmember Parks? I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for this. I think from a business perspective, it makes sense to have a renewal process because, like you said, they're already in the system. You don't have to start over. You'd probably be doing a similar procedure anyway when you go in to do a new application. But I can tell you from an insurance perspective, it'll be a lot easier because they'll just keep renewing that certificate, and then the insurance will see that, oh yes, it's being renewed. It's a renewal, not a new application. Those are different terms in the insurance world. I don't know if that would matter, but I think it seems like a very smooth process that would in fact make things easier for staff. and
Councilmember
owners.
Wright?
Thank you, Sean. I just want to make sure that the renewal process is as streamlined as we can make it, given the problems and the issues that we've had with the rental registration renewal process, where that was just really kind of a clouded event, if you will. But as long as we can make it as easy as possible for the permit holders currently, I think that's what we need to make sure that we do. But thank you for relooking at this.
That would be the intent.
Yeah,
I don't
thank
want to
you.
make it harder for us. I don't want to make it harder for them, so.
Yeah. And one comment that I've heard is if the business has a liquor license, if the contract lapse, they have to go through the liquor approval process again. So we do need to have that place, if that's still the way it is, that we need to have that in place so that the renewal can happen prior to the end. With the insurance, because insurances aren't going to be going the full year, I'm assuming they can upload the current insurance even though the insurance might lapse partway through the process.
Yeah, if nothing's changed on that, then we would just need to verify that certificate was still valid.
Other? Councilmember Parks?
So to your point about the renewal date, I think as long as you have a 10-day grace, it can renew, because typically those are, you know, this one goes up until midnight, this one starts at 12:01.
Right.
Right? So I don't know about starting it beforehand. That may look like, well, I guess in your world, it would be okay. In insurance, it'd be like double coverage.
Right. No, so the intent right now, let's take an example that a business has a permit that would expire, it goes through the end of the year, December 31st. They come in on December 23rd, not the 25th because we're not open, and they apply for a permit. It's before their permit, the existing one has expired. We wouldn't issue that permit, or we could issue that permit whenever, but we can say that this permit is only applicable from January 1
Right.
on.
Right, okay.
So there
the
wouldn't be
effective
double
date.
permit coverage and therefore no double insurance coverage.
Right, thank you.
Any other discussion?
Okay.
Great.
Well, thanks for the discussion. I'll bring this back to council hopefully October-ish with some revised ordinance changes, and then it would be an attached fee resolution that would apply with that as well.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, Jeff Albrecht, related to sales tax revenue designation for capital improvement purposes.
Thank you. I'm going to give a little bit of history, and I'll be honest, there's probably some other people in the room that probably have more understanding of some of the history than I did, because this was passed back in 2010. So I'll defer, but I've kind of done some research and done this. So basically what this is this is an ordinance that was established in 2010, so effective for 2011, that basically earmarked a portion of sales tax to be dedicated toward general fund capital projects. So basically what it says is it took a baseline of what the sales tax collection was at that point, which was averaged out to $594,000 per quarter. And then it said, once you go above that level, half of the money, and this is minus construction, because the construction sales tax can vary quite a bit, half of it will go toward general operations, the other half will be set aside for capital improvement. The concept is excellent to set aside. There's a lot of public entities that don't invest properly in their capital, and I'm guessing that's probably what spurred this discussion on back then, is there wanted to be something to set aside. To be honest, from what I can tell, it was actually a very good formula, and my understanding is it was just kind of developed internally. It wasn't really based off of another city or a standard. And I think it actually served very, very well, especially for the time, but it has been 15 years, and a lot of things have changed over 15 years, including kind of how that's played out over time, as well as kind of where we are financially today. So this just kind of gives you a little bit of the history. So the money is set aside for the CIP reserve. So there's essentially 4 different types of funds when we talk to the state. There's restricted, committed, assigned, and unrestricted, or unassigned. So unassigned, of course, as you can imagine, is the most flexibility. Restricted is the most restricted. So restricted is something that an external group has put on. So for example, if we get a grant, the council can't say, oh, no, we'd rather spend this grant money on something else, right? So the restricted means something in. Committed and assigned is really up to you. You get to decide that as a council. So these are committed funds. So the council has made the designation for these funds to be used for this purpose. You have the ability to change that, or you even have the ability to uncommit those funds if you want to. So you're the ones who decide that. So you can see here the beginning balance as it's grown over the years, the project expenses, and these are actual expenses other than 2025. These are actual expenses, and then the deposits that have been made in using that formula. And then, of course, the ending balance. And you've seen this has grown over the time. The project expenses, you know, the numbers that I'm seeing in 2012, 2013, 2014 especially, were telling me that the city probably needed something like this because they probably weren't investing enough in capital. And other than the COVID years, you see 21 is very low, and even 22, and that's obviously related to COVID. But you've kind of seen that it's really kind of settled into about that $1 million, with the exception of the COVID years, we're about that $1 million. But you can see the deposits have continued to increase and are looking at closer to the 1.3, 1.5 million, and we've got a pretty healthy balance, which is good. I would anticipate most of our expenses in general in most years are probably going to be in that 1 to 1.5 million as near need. But we do have some larger capital that may be, you know, needed in the future. So, but where we run into an issue is, again, that ending balance becomes restricted dollars at the end of the year. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, our cash balance at the end of 2024 was a little over $6.6 million. So you can see out of that $6.6 million, 4.1 million was restricted. So that's a large chunk. We are expected right now, if I had to do a rough projection based off of mid-year, we would probably end the year with about $3.8 to $4 million. $3.8 to $4 million. You obviously can't restrict $4.3 million if you don't have $4.3 million. The two issues I think we're running into is how much this has increased. It's probably now putting in deposits more than we need. Additionally, we've seen our operational expenses increase at a higher rate, and so we're now kind of running into this period where we can't restrict all these dollars because we literally don't have them. Just for perspective, right now the approved 2026 CIP expenditures for the general fund are $735,000. So that's what was approved through the most recent CIP process. So that's theoretically what we're potentially looking to spend in 2026. This kind of gives you a little bit of idea of how these have grown disproportionately. So the blue line is the cumulative sales tax growth. So it's year over year, it adds up. So you can see cumulatively over the last 15 years, it's grown by about 75% or so. because of the way the formula is done, the CIP deposit has grown at a much higher percentage. So that's grown closer to 250% cumulatively over the years. So you can see again how that CIP has grown at a much higher proportion to the operations. Again, operations, because their main sources of revenue are sales tax and property tax, and the property taxes is limited in how much it can grow, that's where we've seen our operational dollars and flexibility really decrease. And we've had to use some of that cash, particularly in the last couple of years, to balance that. So kind of, I guess the short is I think this is a very, very good formula when it was developed. Times have changed. It's got a little disproportionate over the years, and of course the financial situation of the city's changed where we're much tighter than we were even as recently as a few years ago in what we have to do for operational dollars. So I think a few of the discussion points, and this really is a discussion, I think this is something we'll need to address in one way or another before the end of the year based on the current projections. But the formula hasn't been adjusted since its inception. So nothing's changed in the formula. So I don't know that it's necessarily, while it was great, I think when it was adopted, it probably necessarily hasn't stood the test of time very well. The CIP deposits are growing at a significantly higher rate than the overall increases to that tax. So it kind of went where we were underfunding CIP to we're maybe overfunding it a little bit now, or at least compared to the overall sales tax revenues. Don't get me wrong, investment in capital is critical to long-term sustainability. I will always say investment in capital is important, but of course, if you invest in capital, then you don't have the opportunity to do other things, and that may impact operations negatively. So, which I think is kind of where we've gotten to at this point. Again, recent operational deficits are causing decreased overall cash balances. Like I said, our cash balance is probably going to go down. Probably, right now, it's projected to go down by about $2.8 million this year. So that definitely puts us in some tighter decisions. And being able to invest in capital is great, but if you can't pay for the operations, it doesn't do you any good, right? Council has the ability to remove designation on cash. So like I said, that restricted cash, the council has the ability to say we want to unrestrict a portion of that if you want to. So I guess where we're kind of coming to, and we can bring something back at a future meeting, is we're part of the point where if we want to truly have $4.3 billion in restricted cash, we would have to do some severe budget cuts quickly, probably, to make that happen. Or so the two options are and it might be both options. One option would be to reduce the amount that is put in going forward. And that may be due just because of the time, nature there, maybe that might be worthy of discussion anyway. The other option, and that could be done in tandem, and like I said, very well might need to be done in both, is to remove the designation of some of that cash and make it non-restricted for that purpose. So I want to kind of toss this out to council, knowing that we'll probably have to take some action one way or the other, or potentially both before the end of the year.
So with that, Councilmember Fajarin.
Thank you, Jeff. It's kind of crazy how far the CIP deposits have outpaced sales tax. And in my opinion, the CIP fund was really supposed to capture the growth. And if we're not experiencing growth, then these issues arise. Thank you for kind of laying down a little bit of discussion points. What I didn't hear is a recommendation to raise that baseline, that 594,000 baseline higher. Would that also, in your professional recommendation, would that also be a solution for us?
Yeah, I think when I talk about changing that formula, it could be a number of different things. So it could be raising the baseline, it could be lowering the percentage, it could be both, to be honest with you. I haven't necessarily tried to project at this point what the best option might be or a recommendation of an option. But yes, those actually both would be, we could raise that 594 to 700 or 750 or whatever, or reduce a percentage of both. So if council kind of thinks that that's worth exploring, I can start evaluating options and what those would look like to bring forward at a future meeting.
Thank you. I personally would be in favor of a much higher baseline, probably at least 2 times or higher than what we have now. So I'm just saying my thoughts.
So Jeff, related to the baseline piece, if we look at the deposits that we've had for the last 4 years, So if you go back to that, I think it's slide 3, you can see on the second column from the right is the deposits that came in, and then the project expenses, the next one to the left. So if, and you're talking about two potential things. One is the end balance, releasing some of that. The other one is resetting a line. But where we're looking at historically, our project expenses are in the 1 million range right now. We're going to be a little bit lower in 26, just as a precaution. So I'm seeing a baseline that maybe we can't double it, but we could 50% it again and still have the amount that's coming in that covers. Is that accurate, or?
Yeah, I think so. And like I said, I can sit down and kind of do some different number scenarios to take a look at what would still provide a reasonable amount to make sure we're not just completely eliminating our CAP, right? So yeah, I think raising that number, and I think until you kind of sit down and know whether that's twofold or what, I think it's going to be hard to really project at this point. But I can certainly run the options.
I'll let Eric, since I interrupted him, I'll just come back.
Just one more question. I'm kind of just spitballing here. Obviously, this was a decade ago since we last voted on this.
2010.
2010.
So 15
oh, wow.
years.
So 15. Ooh,
Yes.
wow. So to prevent this gap from possibly happening further, would it be able, would tying it to a baseline economic indicator, would that help, or?
That's a possibility, yeah. I mean, you know, you don't have to have anything. I mean, I think there is cities out there. I think it's a good idea to have something just to kind of keep that on the forefront, even if you end up having to revisit it. You know, like I said, this held up pretty well for quite a while, and it's probably not current today. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of different scenarios, whether you just increase it by a percentage, whether you increase it by the same rate as the sales tax increases. I mean, those are all options, so.
Yeah. And I remember when the vote happened back then, and it was because at that time, we didn't have funds for CIP, and we're looking at what's the cost for this new fire truck, what's the cost for this, I mean, these things that we needed to do in the CIP, and we realized if we didn't start raising funds, we wouldn't have the funds to upgrade the different things that we needed to upgrade. Councilmember Parks?
Thank you. Yes, I'm definitely in favor of adjusting this, but I feel strongly that we need to have a bottom limit as far as how far we'll go, because I'm afraid if we just, even if we use a percentage, that could, I don't want to deplete what we have, but I do want to free up cash for the general fund, absolutely.
Councilmember Wright?
And just from a historical standpoint, we would be remiss if we didn't give a nod to Barney Waldrop, whose brainchild this was. And we were coming out of a time frame where, now John Sherman used to be able to just recite these propositions like right off his tongue. I can't remember what they were, but we definitely were in a financial deficit at the time, and we were having trouble even making that 13% cash reserve. And then as things happen, Walmart was completed and opened. And that was where Barney had this brainchild that we were going to be the beneficiaries of so much more sales tax as a result, that he wanted to utilize those funds to, you know, give us a better base. And as you say, it has served us well, you know, for the last 15 years. And I would hate to abandon the concept of it, but I think we can certainly baseline it a little differently, and also to continue to ensure that we keep that cash reserve level where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Councilmember,
That's okay.
Councilmember Lira?
So I'm also in favor of adjusting the formula, potentially the baseline being higher and maybe slightly smaller percentage. I guess my question is, in terms of removing designation, does that refer to like the end balance and moving some of the funds to operations?
Yeah, so basically, if the projection year end may change depending on what we do to formulas, but not significantly because we've already gone through half the year with this. But you could say, right now the designated balance, let's say, is $4.2 million. You could say, you know what, we want to unrestrict $2 million of that, or whatever the case may be. And again, you're going to have to unrestrict at least some if our total cash balance isn't there. And that would be an ordinance that you'd say, we choose to unrestrict X dollars from the CIP fund and make it and move it over to unrestricted funds.
So with this, are you hoping for more clarity on numbers?
I think I have
or-
enough. If I'm understanding right, looking at that, raising either the base level, probably at minimum, and maybe even the percentages, but really want to keep the concept in place, make sure we still have a reasonable number there, that we're not eliminating everything, and then potentially coming back. And it may actually be two separate things. We may kind of have to wait until November or December to decide if and how much we would need to unrestrict. But I think I've got enough to go on to at least run some options and run some numbers. So.
And this isn't new money that we can spend.
This is not new money,
I-
unfortunately. Yes, this is, you talked about running up against the 13%. We're going to be running up against it at the end of the year, and currently we project to go below it in 2026 if things don't change. So.
Okay, anything else on this one? If not, going to our fourth one, and Jeff, I'll let you start.
Yeah, so we don't really have a presentation item on this one, and so this is probably maybe the loosest, I guess, of the discussions. But I do know there's been, at past times, there's been various discussions, or council members have brought up the thought of lobbyists and what the potential that could be. And there was a discussion, I think, going into the previous budget cycle. It was not included in the budget at that point, but I did want to bring it back up. I do know that it sounds like the port is currently looking at some lobbyist options. There may be the possibility of a partnership there. I don't have specific costs. I didn't prepare that for tonight, but obviously whether it's a shared or whether it be new, there'd be costs associated with it. And so I just kind of wanted to open this up for a discussion of, is this something that council is continuing to be potentially interested in? Knowing that one thing that would be is if they did want to go forward this, what will the potential costs be? And would you want to explore that? And then, of course, that means what can we not do because of that cost? So really, I guess it's really more of an open discussion for a lot of you to kind of say, yes, you want to pursue this, no, we don't want to pursue this, or maybe, yes, you want to pursue this, but the time is not right now.
Yeah. And I'll add a little bit when I've had conversations with various.
Jeff, thank you so much for bringing this for us. The two that I talked to most recently in the last, I think it was 2 months, and I've talked to a few others previously, were 2,000 to 4,000, and that includes both state and federal. Well known on both sides. So I'm not sure what the mayor is referring to regarding the 5 or 6, but that's the ones that I've talked to. Hiring a consultant is an investment in our future, period. There's only certain grants that we're going to be privy of with our own grant specialist without some extra help, in my opinion. And the people that I've talked to will work with our grant specialist in order to find additional funds. So while, yes, there's a cost on the front end, on the back end is going to be additional funding for the city. And I had talked to one of them about Ecology's current designation of some of our water systems. And she's previously worked in Ecology and said there is an ability to look at different designation. So there's quite a few opportunities there and I think it's a investment worthy of moving forward.
Okay. Councilmember Delera.
So I am enthusiastic for having a city lobbyist. Regardless if they're focusing on just budget, I would like to see legislation be addressed, but I feel like the most important aspect the city lobbyist should have is advocacy at the state level, since we will directly see the decisions at the state level affect us at the local level. So I think if we're going forward with the city lobbyist, they must look into state advocacy.
Councilmember Fajarin.
Thank you. I agree with all the comments that I've made previously, especially the importance of having a lobbyist. I feel like it is low-hanging. It's an investment. You're paying a certain amount of money a month as a retainer, and I'm looking at some of the. I've talked to a number of consultants as well, but they're securing, $1.5 million in direct federal appropriation from Senator's Cantwell office. I mean, these are big items that go through the state and federal process, and it really helps having somebody who not only knows the process but has those relationships. And on relationships, I would support hiring a lobbying or somebody, but they have to have roots in Eastern Washington. They have to have roots where we're at, so they know Pullman-specific issues and how to bring those concerns over in Olympia. And so some of the quotes that I heard were between 3 and 5, like the mayor said. We were quoted $4,000 for both state and federal support, which includes grant mapping and grant support, as well as federal government lobbying. So bottom line, I will support investment in a lobbyist if council moves forward with it.
Councilmember Parks.
Do we know if any of our neighboring cities or towns have a lobbyist, Colfax or Rosalia or anybody, Palouse?
They're not quite large enough.
They're not large enough, okay. I would support it, especially in partnership with the Eastern Washington, county and the port. I think that could be a really good thing. And I agree that federal is important for sure, but I agree with Councilmember Delera that we could utilize that person to really be, speaking with our representatives much more than we're able to do. And on some of my committees, we've actually discussed that barrier. So those are my thoughts.
Councilmember Wright.
This is going to be a very erudite statement, or not. I guess the question is, can we afford not to? I mean, if they can bring us, even though there may be some things where we'd have to shift resources, if the benefit of having a lobbyist brings us back tenfold of what we spend on it, can we afford not to do it, I guess is where
I'll take off my city administrator hat and put on my finance hat and kind of give you my usual answer. I wish I had my crystal ball. It's one of those things that if it pays off, it could pay off really well. And if it doesn't, it's an additional cost, right? And it's hard to predict those things sometimes, right? So I'm sure there's probably lots of examples out there where somebody's hired a lobbyist and it's, provided millions of dollars. And I'm sure there's probably examples out there where people haven't gotten a return on their investment. And so I think if you do choose to go forward, really understanding what your goals are and what you want to accomplish and how to accomplish those are going to be critical. The one thing that I will caution is, my guess is under any scenario, it's going to take a while to get that return. It doesn't mean it's not worth it, but that return's probably not going to come immediate, so.
Yes, I mean, it is an investment piece. The other thing, just in the context, and this is with the finance hat on, is what would be going after is grant funds that are for projects, but that would increase our staff costs for administration. It doesn't provide for that. So and right now we're trying to deal with the budgets and that's the reason why we didn't move forward last time. But we definitely can continue having the conversations with the port and the county to see if there's a collaboration that would work as a way for us to dip our toe into it without it being as expensive, at the same time figuring out how we would run those expenses. Councilmember Weller.
I think the challenge is if we're going to go into collaboration with the port or the county, what percentage of that is going to come back to us? What percentage of the time? And that's a sticky wicket, right? So what we're needing to also look at is having somebody, a lobbyist or whatnot, that also provides additional face time with our representatives. However, the flip side of that is there are some representatives that they don't like working with lobbyists.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of them that I talked to, capital strategist or something along those lines, has personal relations with our state legislators and representatives, so they seem to be okay with it. So I think if we're going to enter into any agreement, we also need to look at how much say-so do we get on who the county and port are going to be choosing, and do they have the same level of expectations as we do, and also the same quality. You know, they may have a different idea on what they want. So, you know, I mean, the investment is needed. We're growing. We're a more professional city now, so it is needed. Entering into an agreement, I think it's a little tricky. So.
Looks like we have good direction that we can work from. Okay, so with that, so this was kind of a precursor of kind of what a work session would look like. I'm interested in your initial thoughts. Obviously, Jeff said that you could also, you know, provide thoughts later, but if anybody have initial thoughts on this process? Councilmember Fajarin?
I appreciate an open discussion as well as talking directly to my fellow council members, maybe just shortening the work session to a few less items. I think I'd appreciate that.
And normally the work session would be the whole meeting. And if it's a work session where there is not action that's going on, it's just a discussion, then the initial stuff as a part of the meeting, including the public comments, would not be required as a part of that meeting in order to be able to shorten that time down a bit. Councilmember Parks?
I have appreciated hearing the information, the ideas, and then being able to discuss it. And if it's a full meeting, though, I would still be careful of how many items, just because we're getting close to winter, but also if one discussion takes 15 minutes and the other one takes 5, I mean, we never know where it's going to go. Thank you.
That's good. Other thoughts? Councilmember Weller?
You know, I'm going to sit on the other side. I honestly don't see the difference between a regular meeting at this point. You know, we had a roundtable discussion that seems like it's similar as any other meeting we have. And maybe that's because we have all of the other things that people said. You know, we had the full agenda as well, but seemed just like a regular meeting to me.
Okay. Okay, great. At this time, the City Council is going to adjourn to executive session pursuant to RCW 4230-110-1B to consider the selection of a site or acquisition of real estate by lease or purchase when public knowledge regarding such consideration would cause a likelihood or increased price. The executive session expected to last approximately 5 minutes. If it becomes necessary to extend the executive session, someone will return to announce the anticipated additional time needed by City Council. The Council does not anticipate taking action following the executive session. It's 7:45 and we'll start at 7:48, so in 3 minutes. It's 7:53. We'll extend the executive session for 5 more minutes. It's now 7:58. We're coming back from executive session. And with that, I'd entertain a motion. I have a motion for adjournment. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We are adjourned.